Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155
from UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcasts. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championship, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championship, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnold Adolio, and hoping that your day is going well. Wherever you are, whoever you are, you're especially living in the States here, man. Like, America's getting kind of funky and weird right now, but, you know, everything was weird in the year 2020, so who am I to complain? But the world of mixed martial arts and just in general sports is in a very tiptoe state of you don't know where exactly the future is, but you know the direction is going a lot more better than it was back in April of last year. Alright then? So I've been keeping up with like the NBA, I've been keeping up with football, all the MMA companies here. There still seems to be a level of hesitance as to how committed they are into really making a normal schedule for sporting events. At least for major sporting events here. UFC, they're doing their best to go pull up cards, though. It does get kind of frustrating knowing that these fighters have, like, at average, like a month's worth of prep time. Like a month, 2, maybe a rare 3 months in order to prep for their fights. This usually doesn't happen. They usually have, like, 4 months of prep time. Even sometimes they have, like, 5 months of prep time. Instead, here we got fighters who are being called to fight against each other for, like, 2 weeks' notice. Or even a week's notice. For Hannah Cyphers, who, when I did the GSMC Women's MMA podcast, I put them as one of the top 10 like fighters who stood out to me. I didn't even put Amanda Nunes in the top 10. I put Hannah Cyphers there. You know why? And it's not because I believe Hannah Cyphers is better than Amanda Nunes, because she's 100% not. It is Hannah Cyphers was one of those fighters who was able to compete 4 times over the span of 1 year. And she had these like short prep times of like 5 days notice. She fought, I think, 4 times in the span of 5 months. So she had less than a month's average to go prep up for each fight, which is absolutely insane. And also, she was meant to go fight in December, so I don't think it's ever happened in the UFC where a fighter was about to go and fight 5 times in the span of 1 year. Note though, in the 4 fights that she did fight in the year 2020, she lost all of them. She lost all of them very decisively, but she made a whole lot of money, so good on her for that. But the reason I'm discussing about this is because currently there is hesitance for sporting events continuing to happen. The NBA season, it might go and shut down again, because there are athletes who are coming out who are being tested, and they're being tested positive. Also, there are a lot of players right now, it's this thing that's currently happening. It's weird. How the athletes see themselves and how they handle businesses in the NBA is so different from fighters who handle things in MMA. Because in MMA, we got fighters out there who are like, you gotta make the most of every opportunity that's given to you, and you gotta go and make a whole lot of money. There's a lot of like self-promotion out there happening in mixed martial arts, because it's not team-oriented sports, even though there are teams in MMA, technically. While in the NBA, though, they see it as like a business venture instead of like opportunities. Like, if a person with the mentality or the personality of Chael Sonnen were to be in the NBA, man, I'm gonna guarantee you right now, that type of person wouldn't make it in the NBA. Like, they would probably be a role player. Like, if there's an NBA athlete in the form of Chael Sonnen, they would probably be a role player. And that's not me being mean on Chael Sonnen. And it's because players who are just dedicated to purely just going in there, doing the job, and taking the most of making the most of any opportunity, but are perfectly fine not really being overachievers. Well, that's kind of like role players essentially. And when you compare the stars of MMA, other than Conor McGregor and Khabib, who can kind of call their own shots, most MMA fighters really can't call their own shots. They just can't. And so the relationship dynamic between the athletes and the organization is very, very different. And I'm talking about this because right now, I'm looking at Bellator, and Bellator right now is definitely, out of any organization in mixed martial arts, like PFL, Invicta, ONE, UFC, Bellator definitely is a promotion that's very heavy on athlete movement. In the NBA, it's called player movement right now. It might be seen as a negative thing. It kind of is a negative thing, kind of, in the sense that the athletes in the NBA have too much power. They might have too much power. They have too much leeway. And these athletes care way more about maximizing profits and making a whole lot of money and building their brand and like having their own clothing line and getting connections more so than providing money for the actual NBA organization. They got unionization happening here. We got these players who are incredibly intelligent, that people undermine their intelligence, but they're really business savvy. Like heck, look at LeBron. The dude's a billionaire. He didn't go to college, and he's got like multiple endorsement deals happening here. And this dude's incredibly intelligent. All right. But for Bellator MMA though, this coming from CBSSports.com, written in by Brent Brookhouse, in the sense that Bellator is expected to go through, in the next 2 years, go through this huge shift in popularity and success. And it makes sense as to why a person would think that. Because if you look at, I think there's a chart out there, like, since like 2013, money has been steadily going upwards for Bellator. Now, not as much as other organizations, but in terms of the finances, Bellator is doing well for themselves. They are slowly climbing up, and especially in the past 2 years, 2019 and even 2020, they've been doing well for themselves financially. They really have been. And they're signing more and more fighters as time goes on. Like, we're going to see Anthony Rumble Johnson versus Yoel Romero. And I still remember this. I remember in the early heydays of Bellator, a lot of people were thinking, oh man, Bellator, it's just this other organization. It's like the secondary organization. That if you can't make to the UFC, you go to Bellator. That's how it is. Like, Bellator is like the biggest small-time MMA company out there. And now things are shifting, actually. Like, heck, Michael Chandler, he was the guy from Bellator, and then he's over at the UFC, and he's expected to go and become a future title challenger some point in this year, in 2021, if he defeats Dan Hooker. Now, that's going to be an incredibly difficult bout. I'm placing my money on Dan Hooker beating Michael Chandler. But even then, the fact that Michael Chandler, coming in as a former world champion, is expected to be able to compete among the top 5, the very elites of the UFC's lightweight division, that really does show, like, oh my goodness, like, these Bellator guys coming to the UFC, they're a big deal. And as Bellator's promotion continues to grow on, we're seeing more and more fighters go and join the organization. And whenever there is a fighter who decides to go join Bellator, whether it be Leon Edwards or Anthony Johnson, Dana White, when asked about this, he always alluded to the fact that whenever there was an athlete that chose another organization over the UFC, this even happened with like Paige Van Zandt, and also with Chris Cyborg, Dana White always going to say something very similar in the lines of, it was the right decision for them to choose that other organization, because that other organization will do what's best for them. And the way you can interpret that is that, at least the way how I predict it, or how I'm imagining things, is that the UFC and Dana White, there's history about this, where a lot of fighters are always speaking out about how underpaid they are, in the sense that they only get a small ratio of the actual income. And whenever someone asks Dana White, they try to compare, like, hey, Dana, if you look at NFL athletes, NHL athletes, MLB, in boxing, or boxing, not NBA, boxing, they made so much money in boxing. Actually, it's kind of similar, but they make so much more money. But every time someone compares money with other sporting events and genres compared to the UFC, Dana White's response is, well, guess what? That's not how it works over here. Welcome to the fight business. Like, instead of giving like a specific answer that like answers what people want to hear, he just says, welcome to the fight business. That's how things are. Now, I don't agree with him in that assessment. I do believe these fighters should be paid higher. But, the organization does whatever it can to go make money. Then it'll be so strange, though, because if you have, if there are more MMA fighters with the mentality of NBA players, like these proper sharks who are going to go in there, and they're the ones who will take advantage of you, and they'll go take all your money, oh man, it'll be hard. It'll be hard. If there was a little, I think Conor McGregor is, the closest, the MMA world has to LeBron James, in the sense that, the UFC ain't the UFC ain't negotiating with Conor. Conor's negotiating with the UFC. Conor is being able to do what he can on his own time. That's why there's a lot of controversy about Conor McGregor, and why there are some people, some old traditionalists, old heads, do not like Conor McGregor, in the sense that they don't like Conor because for the longest time in fight sports, especially mixed martial arts, it's always the organization, the booker, the promoter, they're finding the talents, and then they're the ones who will judge talents. They'll pay you to go and compete for them, and then you take it and they leave. Nowadays, there's also applying for NBA now. It's always you now have the promoter go find the fighter, and now the fighter or the athlete will be like, I'll do it, but you gotta pay me a whole lot of money. What? You're not gonna pay me that money? I'm out. Alright then? No. You don't boss me around. I boss you around. Alright? It'll be hard to imagine if... and I know Conor McGregor is one instance, and LeBron is a very specific instance, but across the NBA, we've got players here who are so heavy on player movement that every single team in the NBA has maybe 2 to 5 guys who can do what Conor McGregor is doing, where they can go lowball people and be like, nah, I don't feel like competing. No, you gotta give me money. Alright then. And of course, I would love to imagine if Dana White was an NBA GM. I really believe if Dana White was an NBA GM and he had to go negotiate with LeBron James, and he'd be like, look here, LeBron, playing for the NBA, it's an opportunity, not a career. Here's a contract, take it or leave it. And LeBron, I swear, if you were to say those things to LeBron would walk off, not say a single word to you, and next thing you know, he will do everything he can to somehow get you fired from your job, or he's gonna go and he's gonna embarrass your company and put such a bad reputation on your organization that you'll look like an idiot and you'll just end up being fired. Alright? That's what happens. I think there's a joke with LeBron James. They call him Le GM because the second LeBron James is there, he dictates what happens. Like Kawhi Leonard for the LA Clippers. He dictates what happens, alright then? You have to impress him. He doesn't have to impress your company, alright then? Kawhi Leonard, he doesn't have to impress the LA Clippers to get paid. He knows he's very valuable and you want him, alright then? If you're not going to offer him the money, he can walk off, and he does not care. He does not care, right then? And for Conor McGregor, I am happy that he's able to do that, and I'm happy, especially in Bellator, that there are fighters who are getting paid incredibly well. Can you say that they're being overpaid? Yes. You can say that they're being overpaid, but also, I'm happy for these fighters being paid high in the first place, and if the organization is able to pay them and continue to go make a whole lot of money, I don't see what the issue that is. Because the UFC in the year of 2020 has had its biggest surplus of gross income it's ever had in the company's organization. One could argue that 2020 was the best year, ironically, for the UFC in terms of finances. And I would not be surprised if the UFC continues to go make even a lot more money as time goes on in the next 5 years, because Big John McCarthy, he talked about this in his podcast, by the way. John McCarthy, he's part of the media. He's a journalist. He doesn't want to admit it. I'll get into it after the commercial break. Whatever. So, John McCarthy, he said that the Dana White Contender Series contracts and the older fighter contracts, they suck. They ain't good. You're being paid a 6-figure contract that you have to finish. No, okay, technically it's a 6-figure contract, but to get that full 6 figures, you have to fight a whole lot of fights that could span over the course of 3 years. Which means, let's say you're being paid $100,000. You're being paid a $100,000 contract. All right, then your goal: be paid $100,000. All right, then, and then you end up finishing that contract, fighting 2 times a year, over the span of 3 years. All right, then, a 6-fight contract, which meant that fighter who paid the 6-figure contract got paid $33,000 per year. Those are that's proper peanut money. Peanut money, small time, and I won't be surprised if UFC, with their new contracts, continues to go and make more money. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Come back after a short break and continue the discussion. See you soon.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, and I'm discussing fighter movement, or fighters being out there and trying to negotiate. Dana White has said that, he said this before in the past, where fighting for the UFC is an opportunity, not a career. But if you ask any other athlete in other organizations, I understand, like, Dana White's viewpoint is like, it's a fight business. Well, I don't know how that's really an excuse, because for every other business, players can go out there and take advantage of the promoters. Now, I'm not saying it's a completely good idea for these athletes to take advantage of promotions and organizations, but one could argue it's a lot more better for that than the organization or promoters taking care of the athletes, because if you watch the NBA or the NHL or the MLB or the NFL, their money has been going up. It's skyrocketing as more and more of these players are being a lot more vocal, and they're getting what they want. This is the NBA, especially since 2013. The amount of money and the amount of inflation these players are getting is absolutely insane. And it's coming with it, and it's coming as the NBA is going through its most profitable seasons, or its most profitable decade in years, or in the history of its entire organization. And I'm now reading this thing from Brent Brookhouse, where it's expected, or is predicted, that in 2021, the promotion is going to have its best year ever. And I understand it, because my idea is, if the athletes are doing well for themselves financially, or doing incredibly well for themselves financially, and when I say incredibly well, I don't mean like, oh man, this fighter got paid $100,000 per year. Damn, that's really good. Did you know the average money that a person... Okay, so I'm comparing these out. How I define rich, or how I define to be someone to be financially successful, is relative to the job or their role. So when a computer engineer is making $200,000 per year working in Southern California, you'd be like, oh man, you're really successful. Good on you. That's good. But if they're making $200,000 a year working in San Francisco, then you have to be like, oh man, you're making alright. You're making a decent amount of money. Because what's considered good money and bad money, or big time money, or success, is relative to everyone else. Alright then? It's the same reason why we can go say someone like Katy Perry. Like, can you say Katy Perry was successful in the music industry? Yes, you 100% can say she was successful. But then you're going to reach to a point where it's like, was she as successful as like Kanye West or Taylor Swift or even Miley Cyrus? You gotta say no. She isn't. And for when I say MMA athletes or fighters, especially for fighters actually, I always compare, alright, how much money are you making, Connor, or how much money are you making, Chael, or how much money are you making, John Jones, relative? Like, if you're the star of your organization, how much money are you making relative to Tom Brady, or a LeBron James, or a Kyrie Irving, or a Kevin Durant? That's how I define success. If you're a sports athlete, I got to compare your success relative to everyone else's success in terms of financial income. And in this article here, once again, it's written by Brent Brookhouse. He goes on to say that after having to take months off due to COVID, Bellator finished 2020 strong, but what should the expectations be for fans coming to the new year? He's going to say that this year for Bellator will be the most successful it's ever been since 2015. When Scott Coker took over the company back in 2014, he promised big things. Some of those things were delivered, or at least attempted, in his first full year with the promotion in 2015. This you'll recall is when the Bellator Dynamite shows took place and Bellator Kickboxing was introduced. Some of the changes have been lasting, such as finding overseas broadcast talent, and Europe hungry for the kind of content that specifically caters to the MMA audience. So, oh wow. So here's a prediction. So, among the big name fighters released or not signed by UFC that has been as a series of calculated moves financially to close out 2020, Anderson Silva was among who got cut, along with Romero. Shortly after, Scott Coker made an even bigger splash, landing Anthony Rumble Johnson. But at 45, Silva retains a ton of name recognition and might have more left in the tank than the tail end of his UFC run. It's far from ridiculous that he could be at least a number one contender against Gegard Mousasi. No! So I can easily see Anderson Silva competing for Bellator and competing in main events or co-main events, but I just can't see them competing for a title. I can't. No. He'll compete for a title, and it'll be unfair, but I can see it. He'll compete for a title because of name recognition and value. It's like how Verbally Silverdome competing for PFL. He'll definitely compete for the heavyweight title, even though he hasn't done anything of recent. He defeated Alexander Gustafsson, former light heavyweight title contender. All right then, but in the grand scheme of things, he hasn't really done much recently in the past 5 years because of his suspension. So another prediction here is Aaron Pico becomes a title contender. Pico's stumble has been brutal, but he's 24 years old and still developing as a fighter. There's no denying the tools he has to go out there and be given. I'll go on a limb and say 2021 is the year Pico starts knocking off some bigger names and emerges as someone who begins fighting like the guy who arguably was the most hyped up prospect in MMA history. Alright then, so he's only 24 years old. I gotcha. I'm thinking about this right now. It's hard. I mean, I'm one of those people who just never gets into hype. I never do. I sometimes do get to hype. For instance, I was really into the Ben Askren train. Because you hear Joe Rogan mention, like, Ben Askren, man, this guy is, great. This dude can pretty much, it's a dream fight for Ben Askren to go fight against Khabib. And as time went on, the way we see how people perceive Ben Askren right now is kind of like a clown. I don't know if it's official or not official yet. He's going to go fight Jake Paul in a boxing match. And the weird part about that is that Jake Paul, he might actually beat Ben Askren because although Ben Askren is an athlete, the guy was never a good boxer. He just was always this elite level, perfect 10 out of 10 wrestler, or in his UFC run, an 8 out of 10 wrestler. So Askren now, how he's perceived, not looking good, and I feel embarrassed being on that hype train. And I almost don't follow hype trains unless I know for sure that they can definitely get into the top 7 or top 8 into the division. Gilbert Burns, I was on board for the hype for Gilbert Burns because I knew the guy, because the guy was I think number 11. He was outside the top 10 early 2020, and as he was working his way up, you can be okay, this guy obviously he's got, he will definitely defeat Tyron Woodley. In the predictions between Tyron Woodley and Gilbert Burns, it was very, very close in the predictions. And I thought, how is it this close? Gilbert Burns is going to win this. There's no way this fight is going to be, no way. And also, and a lot of people kept mentioning, oh man, dude, Gilbert Burns, he's up and coming. Really, he's been a journeyman for a while in the UFC. I don't get why he's, up and coming all of a sudden. It's weird. But for Aaron Pico, I got to see a lot more from him. Like Aaron Pico and like MVP, Michael Venom Page. When will Michael Venom Page fight real fighters? I'm upset about that. MVP is one of those fighters who's famous and popular for no reason. No, I'll scratch that. Not for no reason, but he's one of those fighters who's big because he's just a really cocky guy who appeals to casuals, but you can't pit him against legitimate contenders because the second he fights legitimate contenders like Diego Lima, that guy gets knocked out. So how do you book Michael Venom Page? Like, I think for the past, like in the last fight of Michael Venom Page, where he had a really hard time fighting against one, like he lost in the first round, I forgot his name, but he lost in the first round, and he went from a cocky fighter to a traditional boxer type of fighting style he developed. And for Michael Venom Page, he's one of those guys, kind of like Sage Northcutt, where you want to see Sage Northcutt in a Michael Venom Page, and even Paige Van Zandt fights, but you don't want to see them fight amongst, the elite company. Because if you were to fight against elite company, they would lose. Even like Sage Northcutt, he didn't really fight elite company also. Like, Van Zandt fought Michelle Watterson. Great fighter, not elite company. Michael Venom Page, he lost to Diego Lima. Then from that point on, he just fought with a bunch of unranked fighters who got like 1-day contracts. And you got Sage Northcutt, who fought against Mickey Gall. And it's Mickey Gall. He's an unranked fighter right now, and he himself is also a prospect. If there's any prospect that I'm kind of hyped up right now, it would have to be Kay Hansen. And when I'm hyped about Kay Hansen, so Kay Hansen's a fighter I'm really high on. Her and Angela Lee is another fighter I'm really high on. But for Angela Lee, she's proven that she's really good, alright, back in 1 championships. She's proven that she's one of the best fighters in the entire world. For Kay Hansen, she's only in her early 20s. She skipped college to become a fighter here. And every time, and although she lost her last fight, she was able to show a whole lot of heart. And you know that she definitely has the tools to be competitive amongst the top 12 in the UFC's strawweight division. But I'm not going to go be like, oh man, Kay Hansen, future world champion. No, I don't see that. For Aaron Pico, I don't see him compete for a title this year. I don't see it. I see him competing twice against 2 top 10 fighters, but I don't see him competing specifically for the title. And so let me get back to that one comment I made about John McCarthy. Saying that he's not... Because there's this thing that went on in the news, this kind of like super small beef, not really that big, where Dana White was calling out the media, and he mentioned John McCarthy being part of the media. And John McCarthy, he scoffed at that in the podcast, where he was saying, like in his like podcast, you can watch on YouTube, go type John McCarthy. He does a show where he talks to like regular MMA news stuff, and McCarthy scoffs at it. And he's like, "Well, first off, I don't consider myself a part of the media." And then he goes and say, "I don't consider myself, a journalist also." And I'm like, wait a minute. You're on YouTube. And you're on Twitter. Alright then. You are working as a content creator doing podcasts on a media platform. You're part of the media. I am part of the media. That random dummy on Twitter who said like, hey man, I stepped on a chip yesterday and then like it talked to me. Or someone who tweeted out, hey, today's my 19th birthday. They're part of the media also. Now, maybe because I'm young, okay? Like, I'm a young guy. And it's something that my professors in time had to, like, accept. In that the definition of who is a member of the media or who is a journalist has changed, especially since with the growth of social media. And YouTube becoming much more bigger over time. So if you ask any old journalists or any old heads in journalism, they'll go say, yeah, being a YouTuber makes you part of the media. And that's maybe because it bothers me when I watch NBA or football YouTubers, and they're like, the media man is hypercritical on these athletes. But they themselves never accept them. They never accept themselves as people who are part of the media. Yes, you are. If you are in a social media platform, which YouTube is, by the way, if you are part of a social media platform, you are part of the media. Dana White, he has an Instagram, right? He's technically part of the media. Being part of the media means you're just somebody who creates content in a media platform. And when you create content, it can be anything as little as a tweet. It could be you posting a picture on Instagram. It could be you on Facebook even posting a picture of your birthday, or you making a 2-minute video saying, I don't think Anderson Silva has a chance to go and compete for the world title. I think Uriah Hall is going to defeat Anderson Silva in his last UFC bouts. Or even you saying, you know what, I don't think that Colby Covington has a chance to go defeat against Jorge Masvidal in the UFC Fight Island show. Also, Dustin Poirier versus Conor McGregor. That fight is going to be really fun. You just saying Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier is going to be really fun. If you record that and you put it out there, you produce it. And when I say produce, I don't mean like film produce. I mean produce as in you upload it in a media platform. You're part of the media. And if you're somebody who covers something that's on the news, you're a journalist. You're a media journalist. John McCarthy, maybe it was his definition of how he defines the media. He thinks the traditional, like, LA Times, the Washington Post, New York Times. I think that's what he thinks the media is. But I think Dana White has accepted this. Where, like, the media can be anybody and everybody. It can be somebody in 4chan putting up some dumb picture of Dana White, like, in his head is like, photoshopped onto Bugs Bunny or Elmer Fudd. He's technically a media journalist. He is. If he does that, like, he's part of the media, but then he says, by the way, Dana White says this, then you're a journalist. So, yeah, John McCarthy, you're a media journalist, okay? Then the definition of who's a journalist and who's part of the media has changed over time. John McCarthy, you're a media journalist. And so I'll be coming back after the short break here, going on to the news brief portion of the podcast here. See you soon.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play. This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
And we are back. And so giving people a heads up right now that Invicta, Bellator, One Championships, they're not going to have any events coming up for the next 10 days. The next big major event coming up, at least for One Championships, will be on the 21st of January. Invicta, they got no plans coming up. PFL, they're still trying to go and organize events. There might be a possibility of an event happening late January, but they're going to have like fighters be called up very late then. Bellator, there was supposed to be an event coming up on January 1st for Bellator. At the time of this recording, it's currently January 11th. And so, what's happening in Bellator? Well, there's a lot of hype going into the year of 2021, but no events have officially been announced, and for all I know, no fighters are aware of the possible matchups that are happening right now for the organization. So, even if you go to the main Bellator sites, they'll say, events coming up, and it's all TBA, TBA, TBA. The future of Bellator right now, it's very optimistic. A lot of people are optimistic, including the fighters and fans, specifically Corey Anderson here. But, yeah, we're just not sure when exactly these events will go on. And I'm saying this as the NBA right now is currently going. There's a lot of, like, criticism going towards the direction of the NBA in the sense that there might be a possibility of another shutdown happening again for the NBA, which would totally suck. It would. I'm getting conflicting reports of like, you know what, the NBA will continue on its track right now where we're going to go and have these players go compete and play against one another. Meanwhile, we got players like Kyrie Irving saying, I'm not in the mood to play. And also, more players are being tested positive for COVID. But, the ratio of it happening is, I think out of 500, I'm not sure the exact numbers here, but I think out of 512 players who were tested for the NBA, 2 of them ended up being tested positive, but they're being tested positive late, and so there's a trace going on right now of those 2 specific players, which has led to already 3 teams interacting and playing against those players. So there's quarantine already happening. The Miami Heat, the Philadelphia 76ers, and the Boston Celtics, 3 major market teams, 3 huge teams for the NBA. They've had their games canceled. The players are unsure what's happening. The owners are unsure of what exactly is supposed to happen. There are, the Sacramento Kings, they already have some people there. We have live attendance happening for some of these games. I know for the Miami Heat games, there's no one there in the attendance, but for Sacramento Kings games, because there's a specific part in Northern California that's very isolated and desolate. Sacramento has to be one of the most safest places in the entire world. San Jose, Sacramento, Stockton, those places. I think there was a report out there a couple months ago. Those are those least likely to have COVID. Those areas, and so the NBA season, they might be shutting down again. So we're not sure what exactly happened for Bellator. I don't think the UFC, they're gonna have their event shut down. They're able to persevere it. They got Fight Island, but as we go to the year of 2021, Corey Anderson is coming in from MMAfighting.com, written by David Martin. Corey Anderson believes that Bellator has the upper hand with a better light heavy division than the UFC. When Corey Anderson asked for his release from the UFC of eventually signing with Bellator MMA, he had a multitude of reasons for that decision. Bellator currently housing Phil Davis, Lyoto Machida, Yoel Romero, Anthony Rumble Johnson. Anthony Johnson, by the way, who, although looked like an ultra heavyweight, walking around 300 pounds, will compete at 205. How does this guy fluctuate his weight is beyond me. And also, it's expected that we're going to see Anderson Silva again. If he were to compete, it would probably be at 185. So, in Corey Anderson's mind, he says that not only it adds up to him as to why he believes that there will be a better light heavy division for Bellator than as opposed to the UFC. He goes on to say, I just feel right now Bellator has the upper hand. Anderson told MMA Fighting. John Jones has left. They've got these hype trains, these young guys UFC has coming in, and they're trying to hype up, but I feel like their legitimacy aren't like the vets that were there that are in Bellator now. He says these last 2 signings, they may definitely make it a stronger case. At first, I was in the UFC and I was number 4 when I left. The only person I hadn't fought was John Jones and Dominic Reyes. I had beat Jan Blachowicz. Once I had against Anthony Smith, was above me, but we see where Anthony Smith is at now. He just got his first win in a while against an unranked guy. They've got me, Anthony Rumble Johnson, Romero, 2 guys right there that fought for titles. Me, who was on the cusp of the title. Then you've got Nemkov, who just beat Ryan Bader. You've got Rumble, who beat Ryan Bader. You got Phil Davis. You got all these names who have already fought at the top at the UFC. While Anderson fully expects an argument to be made that many of the best fighters competing at light heavyweight in Bellator came in after leaving the UFC, as if their prime was up, he would counter by pointing that the resumes possessed are. He says that the resumes possess those athletes. What the heck? I'm gonna quote Corey Anderson here as he says, "They say, oh, these guys are washed up. They got cut from the UFC. No, they got treated wrong and they left. You've got to think about all the people who were cut from the UFC and came back to do what they're doing. That kid, Brandon Moreno, was cut from the UFC, and he came back and fought for the title. Being cut doesn't mean anything. You got cut saying the wrong thing. You got cut for having a couple of bad fights. It happens. But that don't make the fact that these guys are legit contenders or one of the best in the world." Alright then. So I'm going to go back to that. Alright. So, current light heavyweight. Okay. Ryan Bader. Ryan Bader is still a darn good fighter, okay? He's one of the best light heavyweights in the entire world. Okay, you got me there. Corey Anderson, you shouldn't have left the UFC. And I'm saying you shouldn't have left the UFC. I mean that you are definitely a fighter. If you were to compete for the UFC now, 100% you would be the one fighting against Dominic Reyes for the title. You'd be in mix with Dominic Reyes, with Jan Blachowicz. Jan Blachowicz or Jan Blachowicz? Glover Teixeira. I think you'd be a step above Glover Teixeira. And I think it'd be a dream fight if we saw Corey Anderson versus Israel Adesanya. But with that in mind, Corey Anderson, Ryan Bader, Nemkov, alright, 3 darn good fighters there. But now we got Phil Davis, who I like, but it's hard to... Phil Davis is one of those fighters who you can see be competitive against a top fighter, but you can see not winning like the actual title. I'm sorry to say that. Lyoto Machida, who's getting the second win in his career, it's hard to see him compete against Nemkov. Anthony Romo Johnson, this guy here, he left the UFC. He didn't get cuts. He left the organization, or his contract was out, and he didn't want to sign because he had his own like business venture to go do. So Anthony Johnson, he wasn't cut because he sucked. He just didn't want to resign back. He don't want to resign back with the UFC, and that's a big name. Anthony Johnson's a big name, and he was one of the top fighters out there who actually kind of took it to John Jones. But the big question mark has to be Yoel Romero. Is Yoel Romero a top fighter? Like, let's be perfectly honest. Is Yoel Romero a top fighter in mixed martial arts? And when I say top fighter, I don't mean a fighter with name value. I'm saying, is he top fighter in the sense that you can see him have a dominant and or very competitive performance against a top elite fighter in a mixed martial arts organization? Because I don't believe so. I don't think I love Yoel Romero. I do. Many people love Yoel. But it's hard to see him fighting against Nemkov. It's hard to see him beat Anthony Johnson. It's hard to see him beat Lyoto Machida. It's hard to see him beat Corey Anderson. I'm not going to say that Yoel Romero sucks. I'm just going to say that Yoel Romero, he definitely isn't the fighter who I would say is an elite fighter now, in the year 2021. Yes, he's competing for the title, but he competed for the title coming off a losing streak, alright then? He became number one contender despite losing his last fight. So really, how can he be like, alright then, so Yoel Romero, he's a top fighter? No, I don't believe that. I don't. So it is reported that we're going to see Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya. We're going to have a champion versus champion bout. Izzy competing for the light heavyweight title. And it's expected Glover Teixeira will serve as the backup if a fighter were to be unavailable. Robert Whittaker, he's currently unavailable. So, first off, I'm disappointed in that. I would like to see Israel Adesanya defend the belt one or two more times in the middleweight division, just to properly cement himself as one of the best, properly cement himself as maybe the best middleweight champion ever. The best middleweight champion of all time, without a doubt, easily, 100%, Anderson Silva. And Israel Adesanya seemed like somebody who could surpass Silva in the middleweight all-time rankings in terms of success, how many he's holding on to the belt, and I wouldn't be so if Israel Adesanya was committed to becoming the GOAT of the middleweight division, he could have done it. He really could have. It would have been another awesome war with him fighting against someone like Whittaker or even Kelvin Gastelum. Again, that would be awesome. Jack Hermanson, that would be great also for Israel Adesanya to go fight against. But we're not going to see that because he's going to go move on to the light heavy division. Now, will the fight between Blachowicz and Adesanya be awesome? Yes, 100%. I got one of my friends into watching mixed martial arts because of those two fighters specifically. One of my friends who doesn't watch like MMA, he only knows Conor McGregor and Ronda Rousey. Just actually not even really much of Ronda Rousey. Like, he knows the name of Ronda Rousey, but he can't tell you anything memorable that Ronda Rousey did in her time as an MMA fighter. But he knows Conor McGregor, and he knows Floyd Mayweather. So it'll be interesting to see what his reaction would be like. It's always fun trying to show your friends something that you're really into, and you want to see what their reaction would be. Because, and it's not just him, like, a bunch of my friends are, like, anime geeks and anime nerds. And Israel Adesanya, I've been saying this for years, Adesanya connects to a certain audience, to a very trending audience, that is ever growing. Like, nerd culture is kind of growing and becoming huge and huge. Anime, geek culture, video games, it's becoming big now, where you could argue that YouTubers who focus and dedicate their time into playing these like geeky stuff or into these geeky stuff like Pokemon are transcendents in that they're becoming incredibly big and it's a normalized thing for you to like those stuff. And nobody from the UFC or even MMA tries to connect to that. Like Demetrius Johnson, outside the cage is like a super geeky nerd. He's really into that stuff, but he never really puts it out there, like in public. Well, it says like, here's my fighter's life, and then here's like DJ's life. Roxanne McDafferty puts it out there, and although she's an awesome fighter, she's somebody that everyone loves to go see and watch. She's definitely not a champion. And for Adesanya, he has to be the most highest profile fighter who is out there, who's putting it all out, like his weebness, his dorkiness, his geekness. And Adesanya, I think I read up an ESPN article about him. I read an ESPN article about Israel Adesanya, where they wanted to say that Israel Adesanya, more than any other fighter, other than Conor McGregor, is most likely to be the next big transcendent star for the UFC. And I agree with them. The guy has natural charisma. The dude is incredibly entertaining. He's incredibly entertaining in the octagon when he tries, or when he's not fighting against Yoel Romero. The guy's got an out-there personality. There's nobody in the world of mixed martial arts that's like him, that's currently in the status that he's in right now. The dude comes across as a star. He talks like a star. He has a fun fighting style. Israel Adesanya is definitely a person who's got superstar qualities in him, though. But he will fight against Jan Blachowicz. And Jan has to be one of the most scariest looking fighters out there in the world. So when my friends watch Jan Blachowicz, their initial reaction was like, oh my goodness, that is one scary looking man. And the dude is scary. He is. And for Adesanya versus Blachowicz, who would win this bout here? Well, easy without a doubt. Who is most likely to knock out the other fighter? I say Blachowicz. If these two fighters were just like a pure boxing match against each other, I would give it to Jan Blachowicz. I would. I think Jan Blachowicz has the power game over Izzy. Izzy has deceptive power game. I think they're both equal in terms of angling and timing their shots. People underrate how good of a boxer Jan Blachowicz is, especially in his last battle against Dominic Reyes. And I think in terms of striking accuracy, maybe you might give a slight edge towards Izzy, but it's very underrated of Jan Blachowicz, and he's deceptively fast contrary to his size. So being able to go spot, the angling and what your safe zone is at and his striking range is very difficult for him. He is deceptively quick, and if you don't do a good job trying to find the angles that he's trying to look out for, you might get knocked out. If and when Israel Adesanya fights against Jan Blachowicz, it's definitely going to be a close bout, and I wouldn't be surprised if the betting odds do come out from that fight, and it's like minus 150 or minus 160, because you can conceivably see both fighters winning that bout. You're listening to the GSMC MMA podcast. Coming back after a short break here. See you soon.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And we are back. And so, Dana White goes on to say that Robert Whittaker will have to fight somebody else before he gets the title shots. So Robert Whittaker, he defeated Jared Cannonier and was expected to be next in line to fight against Adesanya, which would be a rematch. Adesanya won the first bout, but it was a very fun bout when those two fought off for the very first time. It was back in UFC 243 with Israel Adesanya winning by second round knockout in a very, very close bout. I think the UFC and Israel Adesanya, they really wanted somebody else other than Robert Whittaker to be the guy to be given the opportunity to fight for Adesanya yet again. I think the UFC would have preferred having Jack Hermanson, would have preferred Jared Cannonier, would rather have Darren Till, but all those fighters who were expected to go fight against Izzy, they didn't pan out that well in the year 2020 and also in 2019 in their runs trying to make the claim to become the next top contender. So Whittaker, he was next in line, which in turn jump-started Israel Adesanya to be like, okay, I'm not pursuing for the light heavyweight title, because there really isn't much for Israel Adesanya for beating Whitaker. There really isn't. And which is really upsetting, because those two would have another great match. It's just, I think Israel Adesanya, he wants to go bypass the whole, I gotta defend my title a whole bunch of times, and is gonna move up one weight class. Which is upsetting for me, because I hate, how many times in the past 2 years has there been a title being vacated? It just seems like almost every fighter who ends up becoming champion either decides, okay, I'm gonna fight for another title in another division, or they're gonna retire at top. And I get it. I understand the meaning behind retiring at top, but for me, I think it's safe. I think if, you know why these fighters retire at the top? Even though they go on to say, like, oh man, I feel like I can go and compete at the highest level still. Like, even Daniel Cormier, Henry Cejudo, Khabib Nurmagomedov, they all say, I believe I can go and compete at the highest level still. Well, why aren't you competing at the very highest level still then? Why? I mean, it just, it upsets me, because we'll never know, because several years down the line, when you look at who are the best all-time in UFC's history, then there's going to be like a bunch of what-ifs. It's like, what if Henry Cejudo were to fight against KG Dillashaw again? What if, Davison Figueiredo were to fight against Henry Cejudo? What if this? What if that? Like, what if Rob Whitaker fought against Israel Adesanya again in a rematch? Would Whitaker win? I don't know. We're not knowing these because we got fighters constantly moving up. If John Jones continued being the light heavyweight champion, then we could have seen Israel Adesanya versus John Jones. But now it's John Jones moving up, Adesanya moving up, and who would stop Israel Adesanya if Izzy were to defeat Jan Blachowicz, or if Jan were to win his match? Who's to say that either of those two would be like, you know what, I'm going to challenge for the heavyweight belt? No. There's no. I understand because it's very appealing to have champion versus champion bouts. It's very exciting to see champion versus champion bouts here. But come on, stuff like that carries instability in the division, which happens for every division. Every single time a title is vacated for a respective division, there becomes like a short period of like, okay, what's going on here? Like, how's this housing going to be, finished here? Are we going to have 4 fighters compete for the title? Is this fight going to be for the interim title? Is this fight going to be for the real title? What's going on here? And it creates confusion, and it is upsetting and confusing for fight fans. And also, it takes away opportunities for challengers, because we got fighters moving up. Here's the thing: I know people don't think Paulo Costa should fight against Israel Adesanya again, because he was dominated so easily in the bouts when he had with him. But then again, it would be fun to see, like, hey, if these two were to fight again, knowing what we know now, how would Israel Adesanya, Paulo Costa, Rob Whitaker, how would they change their game plans? That's stuff I want to see, but we're not going to see that. We're not going to see rematches. I think in this current era of mixed martial arts, we will not see rematches. I believe so. I think the time or the era of seeing, best of threes, or a fighter fighting each other, three consecutive times, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think so. I think there are a lot of fighters now who believe that, okay, if I beat that guy, alright then, I don't want to go and I want to move on to another challenge. Because you're risking the chance of possibly losing, and if you lose, then you gotta go to a best of 3, and so a lot of your time is dedicated or focused towards this one person for years, when it can be focused on, like, accomplishing other things. It kind of is, like, you're using your time, and the world of mixed martial arts, time is very, very valuable. Alright? This reminds me kind of... So me and my friends, we play a lot of, like, Smash Bros. And Tekken. Whenever we do anything competitive, even like my family members, whether it be like basketball or football and stuff, or billiards or darts, we would always stop the second we know that we're ahead. It's weird. Like, one of my friends, one of my cousins, we played billiards with one another, and it was a close game, and we only played one game. And then from that moment on, he's like, you know what? I'm retiring undefeated against you. And I think that's the mentality that a lot of these athletes have now. I mean, a lot of these MMA fighters have. They don't want to risk and put in the time fighting against or competing against another person for a couple of years or putting so much time into fighting somebody that could last for a couple of years when they should go and be able to use all the time to go and like win a lot of titles or be part of more and more key matchups here. I believe Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz 3. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think so. Because I think it'll be a lot more valuable for the UFC and for Conor if Conor were to go and fight for a title. If Conor McGregor and Nate Diaz, if you use it, then use it up. You use up your big money match. It just, man, I like to see feuds. I don't think feuds are happening anymore in the world of the UFC. I think there are short-term feuds now, but we don't see like feuds that go on for years. And the last feud I think that went on for years was Tyron Woodley versus Colby Covington. But by the time that those two fought, it was very underwhelming. And I think Colby Covington's pretty overrated. I think the dude just throws out a high volume of strikes. And the opponents he's fighting have the tendency of being incredibly passive. I don't know. I think Colby Covington, if you were to fight against like really strong counter fighters, and as fighters who are just not taking these shots, or easily get overwhelmed by the high volume, then I think Colby Covington would be in a very different positioning in his rankings here. Like, that's what happened when he fought against Kamaru Usman. Kamaru Usman, just like Colby Covington, he's not necessarily the most dangerous of strikers in the sense of power, but he's somebody who can throw out a high volume. And when you have two fighters that's throwing out high volume, for some people it might be like, whoa, oh my goodness, look at these guys. They're both throwing it all on the line out there. High volume of strikes, wow. But for some people, we're like, these punches are not going to mean that much. Like, neither fighter here is going to get knocked out. Okay, we got two grapplers here trying to be strikers. What's going on? You don't really feel that much about the striking aspect of Colby Covington. And as Tyron Woodley, the guy, I don't know what his future is for UFC. I don't know. I think he should retire. Yeah, if Tyron Woodley doesn't want to be an MMA fighter, he should just say it. I think maybe, just maybe, he's trying to go and just run out his contract, finish his contract dates, and then go and pursue something else in his life, whether it be music, acting, journalism. That's on him. And so this is coming up from UFC's Dana White via Bleacher Report. Stipe Miocic, Francis Ngannou will probably fight in April. UFC President Dana White believes a super fight between Stipe Miocic and Francis Ngannou for the heavyweight championship belt is likely to take place some point in spring. He goes on to say, we've got Stipe and Francis probably in April, White told ESPN's Laura Sanko on Thursday. Miocic reclaimed his title against Daniel Cormier back at UFC 241, and Francis Ngannou, he's been buying his time, dude. This guy, he's been buying his time, waiting for that big title match, and Ngannou versus Stipe Miocic. This will definitely be a battle between... So there's a rematch here, obviously. Miocic will probably go shoot in for a takedown. Francis Ngannou probably 100% will work on his grappling and his wrestling ability here. And so the story in this bout here will be, who's grappling superior? I'm saying this right now, and for all I know, this bout can end in 20 seconds with both guys throwing out bombs. And Francis Ngannou, he's been waiting for a very long time. And if these were to fight again, I will probably favor Stipe Miocic winning the bout here. Francis Ngannou, he's been getting better. From his training camp, it's been said that he is putting in a lot more effort into being an all-around fighter, throwing in a lot more kicks, trying to handle himself in the cage, trying to learn how to wrestle and how to grapple. Francis Ngannou was a very green fighter last time those two fought. But I think if these two were to fight yet again, it would be a lot more closer bouts, but I still say Stipe Miocic would win this. And so I'm reading this article coming from SBNation.com, written by Ryan Harkness, has how being Francis Ngannou is sick of waiting for title fights. I don't know what I'm doing exactly. He goes to say, it's been a lifetime, and it's frustrating, even though I'm trying to take it out of my mind, knowing I can't do nothing to change it. This is him saying this in the MMA Fighting podcast interview. Even before fighting in May, I've been through some sort of situation which kind of got me to get me ready. I was waiting for Stipe in DC, which in August, and obviously I was hoping for something in December. After that fight, I had to come back to Cameroon, and I was expecting something on December because it's 4 months away, maybe January at the latest, but obviously not. I don't know. What I know is that they just said March, and it's not official, and who knows? Who knows what will play out? So, Dana White saying April, Ngannou saying maybe March. That might happen though. As I'm thinking about this, really enough, after the Ngannou-Miocic fights, winner of that bout should fight against Derek Lewis. And I'm not saying Derek Lewis should get a title fight because I love Derek Lewis, because he's funny. He's a funny, amusing, charismatic guy who always delivers these exciting brawl fights or something out there. Alright, then Derek Lewis versus Alexei Oleinik has to be one of the most fun fights I've ever seen in my entire life. Just because we're seeing like technical grappler Derek Lewis wrestling with the greatest submission artist in UFC's heavyweight history in Alexei Oleinik, and Derek Lewis is wrestling him as if like he's a white belt. Which it's one of those amazing things I've ever seen. And I would love. And here's the thing: if Miocic were to go wrestle, one thing for sure I know, Miocic can wrestle Ngannou, and it's very likely that Stipe Miocic could out-wrestle Ngannou. I don't think it's that likely for Miocic to go and out-wrestle Derek Lewis. Which is weird, because Derek Lewis for the longest time was known as the one-dimensional fighter who's known for his knockout power. Well, guess what? He's been working on his wrestling also. And if Derek Lewis can put it all together, kind of like Ngannou, those two would have all the tools to become a world champion. And so coming up this Saturday, January 16, will be UFC Fight Island yet again. UFC Fight Night, Holloway vs. Kattar. So Calvin Kattar, Max Holloway, they're going at it. This bout is going to be a very close one here. So I predict Max Holloway wins the first round, and it's very likely that Holloway is going to win the second and third. Calvin Kattar can pull away by winning the fourth and fifth round. The big issue with this fight here is that Calvin Kattar has a tendency of starting off really slow, while Max Holloway goes full in a lot, especially in early rounds here. So I say in the second half of the bout, Kattar wins. First half of the bout goes towards Max Holloway. And if Calvin Kattar can get that early head starts, starting off in the second and third round, because I don't believe Calvin Kattar can win the first round, then Kattar should be able to go and defeat Holloway purely by attrition. So I'm predicting Holloway winning, but if Calvin Kattar can have a victory in the second and third, because I don't see Holloway doing well for himself in the fourth and fifth, then Calvin Kattar might win. And the co-main event, we got Matt Brown versus Carlos Condit. Yes, Carlos Condit is indeed still fighting. Li Zhangyang versus Santiago Presumbio, which could be a standout fight here. Joaquin Buckley versus Alicio Di Trico. Joaquin Buckley, if you don't remember, is that guy with that spinning insecurity knockout. And also he had another knockout beforehand that also. So performance tonight might be given to Joaquin Buckley if he goes out and gets another knockout victory. But in the world of mixed martial arts, anything can happen. We also have Dasko Todorovic against Penel Soriano. And that's the main card there. For the prelims, we have Philip Hawes versus Masudin Amamov. Yunanan against Jocelyn Edwards. Tom Breeze against Omari Akhmedov. Oh, that looks really good. Justin Tafa against Carlos Felipe. David Zawaba versus Ramazan Amiv. Vanessa Melo versus Sarah Moraz. And Jacob Kilburn versus Austin Lingo. And that's coming up January 16 for the return of Fight Island UFC Fight Night. Coming up Saturday, January 16. So that will bring us to a close for today's podcast. You have been an awesome audience, and all I gotta say is thank you. Thank you for listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask you, please remember to subscribe to this show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a nice night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.